The Middle East has always been a center of human advancement. Around 3500 BCE, the Sumerians in southern Mesopotamia developed the earliest known form of writing, cuneiform. This marked the beginning of recorded history. Along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, city-states like Lagash, and Babylon flourished. These cities introduced governance, religious temples, taxation, and legal systems. As civilizations advanced, the region's location between Europe, Africa, and Asia made it a natural hub for trade. This is where the idea of the Silk Route emerged. Goods, ideas, and cultures moved between China and the Mediterranean, passing through cities like Damascus, Baghdad, and Aleppo. By 130 BCE, under the Han Dynasty in China, the Silk Route became formalized as a global trade network. Spices, silk, tea, ivory, and glass moved east and west, but so did philosophies, religions, and diseases. The Silk Route made the Middle East not just a marketplace but a melting pot of civilizations. But where trade flourishes, so do rivalries. City-states and empires battled for control of these routes and their riches. The Middle East gave birth to the three great monotheistic religions. Judaism emerged around 2000 BCE with Abraham, Christianity spread from the teachings of Jesus in the 1st century CE, and Islam was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad in 610 CE. After Muhammad's death in 632 CE, the Islamic caliphates began expanding. The Rashidun, Umayyad, and Abbasid caliphates turned the Islamic world into a superpower. The Abbasids moved the capital to Baghdad in 762 CE, transforming it into a center of global learning. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad attracted scholars from across Asia, Europe, and Africa. But religious divisions soon emerged. The split between Sunni and Shia Islam began over a dispute regarding Muhammad's rightful successor. This schism became a source of persistent tension and civil war, affecting everything from leadership to theology. The Crusades added another layer of conflict. Between 1095 and 1291, European Christian armies launched military campaigns to retake Jerusalem from Muslim control. These wars caused immense destruction and deepened the mistrust between the Islamic world and the West. The Mongol invasion of the Middle East began in 1219 under Genghis Khan's descendants. By 1258, the Mongols had reached Baghdad, burning the city to the ground and killing the last Abbasid caliph. This event marked the symbolic end of the Islamic Golden Age. Libraries were destroyed, scholars killed, and the fragile unity of the Muslim world collapsed. Although the Mongols later converted to Islam and formed the Ilkhanate, the damage was irreversible. The political vacuum led to the rise of smaller Islamic states and sultanates, which constantly fought for dominance. The once unified Islamic world became fragmented. Meanwhile, the Silk Route faced new challenges. The instability made trade routes unsafe. Maritime trade began to rise as an alternative. This shifted economic power toward coastal cities and empires, reducing the Middle East's centrality in global commerce, a shift that would have lasting consequences. In 1299, Osman I founded the Ottoman Empire in Anatolia. By 1453, his successors captured Constantinople, renaming it Istanbul. The Ottomans expanded rapidly, capturing Arab lands, Egypt, North Africa, and the Levant. The empire became a new center of Islamic power and stability. Under Sulayman the Magnificent, the empire reached its peak in the 16th century. The Ottomans controlled critical trade routes and revived parts of the Silk Route. They were the guardians of Mecca and Medina and established a strong bureaucratic and military structure. However, by the 18th century, the empire began to stagnate. Technological lag, administrative corruption, and the rise of European maritime empires began to weaken Ottoman control. European colonial powers, particularly Britain and France, looked at the Middle East with increasing interest. Napoleon's invasion of Egypt in 1798 symbolized the West's new ambitions. Oil had not yet been discovered, but the strategic location of the Middle East already made it a prize. The aftermath of World War II saw global sympathy for Jews following the Holocaust. In 1947, the United Nations proposed a partition plan to divide Palestine into Jewish and Arab states. Jews accepted it, but Arab leaders rejected it. On May 14, 1948, the State of Israel was declared. The next day, Arab nations invaded, leading to the First Arab-Israeli War. Israel emerged victorious, but over 700,000 Palestinians were displaced, beginning the Nakba, the catastrophe. In 1967, the Six-Day War saw Israel capture the West Bank, Gaza, Sinai Peninsula, and Golan Heights. In 1973, the Yom Kippur War led to further regional polarization. The Camp David Accords in 1978, brokered by the United States, saw Egypt become the first Arab country to recognize Israel. Despite peace efforts, violence continued. The Palestinian Liberation Organization, founded in 1964, led an armed resistance. The Oslo Accords of 1993 gave some hope for a two-state solution, but the assassination of Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin in 1995 and ongoing terror attacks derailed the process. In 1979, Iran overthrew the Shah in a popular revolution and established an Islamic Republic under Ayatollah Khomeini. This was a turning point. Iran became anti-Western and challenged Saudi Arabia's leadership of the Islamic world. The U.S. embassy in Tehran was seized and American diplomats were held hostage for 444 days. The Iran-Iraq War followed from 1980 to 1988. Saddam Hussein, backed by the West and Gulf states, invaded Iran. The war killed over 1 million people but ended in stalemate. This deepened regional sectarian divides. During the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union treated the Middle East as a proxy battlefield. Afghanistan became a key front. The Soviet invasion in 1979 led the United States and Pakistan to support Afghan Mujahideen, who later became the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. On September 11, 2001, Al-Qaeda launched the deadliest terrorist attack on American soil. In response, the United States invaded Afghanistan to dismantle the Taliban regime. 2 years later, in 2003, the United States invaded Iraq under the claim that Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction. None were found. The Iraq War destabilized the country. Sectarian violence erupted between Sunnis and Shias. In the vacuum, extremist groups like ISIS emerged. In 2014, ISIS captured Mosul and declared a caliphate. Their brutal rule led to global condemnation and a multinational military response. ISIS was eventually defeated territorially, but its ideology persists. Terrorism remains a constant threat in the region, fueled by foreign occupation, failed governance, and radical teachings. In 2011, a fruit seller in Tunisia set himself on fire to protest police harassment. This act sparked protests across the Arab world. Egypt, Libya, Yemen, Syria, and Bahrain saw mass uprisings. Dictators were overthrown, but dreams of democracy quickly faded. In Libya, NATO bombed Muammar Gaddafi's regime. In Syria, peaceful protests turned into a full-scale civil war. Iran and Russia backed Bashar al-Assad. The United States and Turkey supported rebels. ISIS took advantage. The war has killed hundreds of thousands and displaced millions. In Yemen, a Saudi-led coalition bombed Houthi rebels backed by Iran. The war created one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. The Arab Spring, once a symbol of hope, became a symbol of broken promises. Today, the Middle East is a battleground of shifting alliances. Iran and Saudi Arabia continue their Cold War. Israel has normalized relations with several Arab states under the Abraham Accords, signed in 2020 with the UAE and Bahrain. Russia has gained influence through its intervention in Syria. China is investing in infrastructure through the Belt and Road Initiative, reviving parts of the ancient Silk Route. Turkey is asserting itself in Libya, the Eastern Mediterranean, and the Caucasus. Meanwhile, the United States has reduced its footprint, creating power vacuums. Regional players now act more independently, sometimes recklessly. Every conflict becomes a proxy for others, and diplomacy is often replaced by drone strikes and cyber warfare. The Middle East's conflicts are deeply rooted in history, colonialism, religion, resources, and foreign intervention. The legacy of broken promises, artificial borders, and suppressed voices continues to haunt its people. But change is possible. Peace agreements like the Abraham Accords, reforms in Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and the rise of youth-driven movements offer hope. Investment in education, infrastructure, and dialogue can transform the region. Only when the Middle East embraces its rich heritage and rejects cycles of revenge can it move from being a battlefield of history to a beacon of civilization once again. By the early 20th century, the Ottoman Empire was known as the sick man of Europe. When World War I broke out in 1914, the Ottomans joined the Central Powers. The war devastated the empire. In 1916, the infamous Sykes-Picot Agreement was secretly signed between Britain and France, dividing the Middle Eastern Ottoman territories into spheres of influence. Visual stock footage of the Ottoman Empire in World War I battles. In 1917, the British issued the Balfour Declaration, supporting the establishment of a Jewish homeland in Palestine, further complicating regional politics. Meanwhile, T.E. Lawrence, known as Lawrence of Arabia, led an Arab revolt against the Ottomans with promises of independence that were later broken. After the war ended in 1918, the Treaty of Sèvres in 1920 dismantled the Ottoman Empire. New nations like Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon were formed under British and French mandates. The artificial borders drawn during this period ignored ethnic and religious realities, creating fragile states filled with resentment. In 1908, oil was discovered in Iran, then called Persia. Soon after, vast reserves were found in Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait. By the 1930s, oil had become the most important resource on Earth. Western companies, particularly British and American, controlled extraction and profits, often at the expense of local populations. This economic imbalance led to political instability. Monarchies were installed or supported to protect Western interests. In Iran, Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh nationalized oil in 1951, leading to a CIA-backed coup in 1953 that reinstated the Shah. These actions fueled anti-Western sentiment that would explode decades later. Meanwhile, new regional powers emerged. Egypt, under Gamal Abdel Nasser, promoted Arab nationalism and pan-Arab unity. In 1956, the Suez Crisis erupted when Egypt nationalized the Suez Canal. Britain, France, and Israel attacked Egypt, but international pressure, especially from the United States and USSR, forced them to withdraw. This marked the decline of European colonialism in the Middle East.